Welcome and thank you for joining us for this discussion on food systems based in wetlands. So, wetlands are areas where water is the primary factor controlling the environment. These includes the plants and animals present in the area. So, a variety of water bodies can be included in wetlands. The Ramsar Convention recognizes 42 types of wetlands, which are grouped together in three categories. These are marine and coastal wetlands, inland wetlands, and human made wetlands. India alone has millions of small and large wetlands. In 2024, ISRO's Space Application Center mapped a total of 2.49 million wetlands with area greater than or equal to zero point 0.1 hectare. And there were 1.09 million wetlands with area less than zero point 0.1 hectare. However, only 93 of them are protected under the Ramsar Convention. Uh, but the number is increasing steadily. So their importance is being recognized slowly. One thing is common about all of them. They are rich in biodiversity and have been called the supermarkets of the earth for this reason. Uh, what is available there includes everything from fragrant khas, which is a grass, to kevra, which it also includes protein-rich makhana to nutrition green leafy vegetables like kolami and helencha sag, tubers like arbi, and rhizomes of kamal kakdi. These plants in wetlands have nurtured communities for long. There are hundreds of such edible plants in our wetlands. However, these foods are missing from our plates now. There are many reasons for this. Land conversion, pollution, climate change are some of them. But what is of concern is the fact that these plants are missing from people's memory and also in policy. So people don't remember that they can consume this. Slowly, this knowledge is dying out. So even those people who live in close proximity to the wetlands rarely consume them now. And those who are supposed to protect wetland do not think of these plants when devising policies for protecting the ecosystem. So we want this to change, and we have brought together experts who have spent years working on wetlands. We will ask them a few crucial questions. What is the status of edible plants in wetlands? Why are these plants neglected by people? And policy. And what can be done to bring them back to our plates? Let me first introduce the panel. I am Vibha Varshne and I head the Biodiversity and Food team at the Center for Science and Environment. I will moderate this discussion. My colleague Shimali Chauhan will present the findings from our report Missing from the Plate Edible Plants in Wetlands Lose Favor. Our panelists have contributed to this report. So we have Nivedita Mani, who is a project manager at the Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group in Gorakhpur, Uttar Pradesh. We have Samir Gautam, who is a researcher at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. Arghya Chakravarti is a technical officer at the Wetland International South Asia, and he is filling in for Ritesh Kumar, who could not join us today. Ashok Biswal could also not join us due to some personal issues. First, I will invite Shimali to share the findings of our report.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'll just share my screen and start. Yeah. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shamali, working as a research associate at Center for Science and Environment. So, presentation today is based on a report that is missing from the plate and edible plants in wetland lose favor. So, this study addresses a critical question that why these wetland vital food sources rich in nutrition and are climate resilient, they are being ignored, and what are we losing as a result? So, uh, so first we'll review the method, how we had like followed the taken into the primary research and the secondary research, followed by the threats that India's wetlands are facing, and then dive into the different regional case studies. Then finally, we'll propose a concrete food focused recommendations to bring back these hidden resources back to our plates and into our policy frameworks. So first, the objective, so the objective of this report is to examine the plant-based biodiversity of wetlands and how it has contributed to the food security of the local communities, and also to fill the critical knowledge gap about these plant-based food systems based in the wetlands. Then we followed a mixed method approach. Like for the secondary research, we analyzed the wetland distribution across Indian states that contributed, and the distribution. This is getting like, yeah, the secondary research, and we conducted a literature search. For that, we identified only 31 papers, like research papers, that directly reported on the edible plants in Indian wetland ecosystem. Then we created a database of over 400 wetland species, and we found that research on edible plants, like specifically on edible plants in India, Indian wetlands, they are not so popular, and the national policies, they lack recognition of these edible plants, like wild edible plants, as a resource. Then for our primary research, we have visited 5 wetlands in different states: Bihar, UP, Odisha, Ladakh, and Karnataka, that representing diverse wetlands. And we also engaged with the local communities, the state authorities, and the experts to understand the on-ground situation. So what we found overall is that the wetlands, they are generally in a poor state, and there is a severe loss of traditional knowledge among the younger generations. And communities on ground, they hardly knew of, like less than 50 species they knew of, despite documentation of more than 400 species. So this was our methodology. Then moving on to the overview status and the threats of the wetlands. So wetlands, they generally are basically are the saturated areas, either seasonally or permanently. That includes the wetlands, rivers, lakes, marshes, and even the human man-made sites like rice paddies or the reservoirs. So if we see overall the Asia, that hold the highest share of the wetlands globally, that is 31.8%. And in India, if we talk about the total wetland area is 18.89 million hectares, which is contributing like 5.15% of the total geographical area. So if we talk about the wetlands, they provide a critical ecosystem services, promote support like a variety of hydrological functions, and are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on planet. So they are also referred to as the natural supermarkets. So the services they provide like freshwater supply, the groundwater recharges, flood control, and even the climate change mitigation, which serve as carbon sinks. If like so they like overall, if we say they support around 1/5 of the nation's rich biodiversity. Next is the global and the national trends. So if we talk about the loss of the wetlands, globally, the rate of loss has been accelerated in the last 100 years, with about 64 to 71% loss since 1900. And between 1970 and 2015, both the inland and the coastal wetlands, they shrank by 35%. And that rate is 3 times faster than the forests. Just So the major threats, if we talk about the population growth and the development, urbanization, farming, construction projects like the dams, and states, they often prioritize economic development over the ecological conservation. Then the pollution from the industries and fertilizers, pollution from waste, then sewage, Also, the pesticides that come in that contaminate the water sources and the edible plants. Then there is aggressive growth of invasive species that chokes the water surface and competes with the native edible plants. Then lastly, the climate change that alter the rainfall and the flood cycle, and it disrupts the phenology and the productivity of the wetland species. Now, the case studies. So, there are 5 case studies. We'll start from Bihar. And in Bihar, we have visited this Kabartal Jheel, which is the Asia's largest freshwater oxbow lake, and is also a Ramsar site. And Bihar, it covers around 0.47 million hectares of wetland. So, which is crucial for the flood management. And out of 23 edible plant species found in Bihar, there are few of them listed here. So there have been commercially important species like makhana, singhada, there's water spinach, and lotus, which are there are also the traditional foods like wild rice, ramdana, and greens like kubahi, which is they are collected by poor and are especially nutritious during the monsoon season. Now the threats and the impacts. So the major threats and impacts which was found in the wetlands of Bihar was the flood control embankments and infrastructure like roads and the railways. They have severed the old age construction, the connection between the rivers and the wetland complex. Also, the lake is shrinking yearly, like every year, impacting the growth of these edible wet, wetland plants. There's lack of water. So when there is no water, means no work. So the marginalized communities like the fishermen and the landless laborers, they are often forced to migrate. Then also there is one more problem that like focus has shifted to the large scale cultivation of this profitable commodities like makhana, and that leads to the near extinction of indigenous wild species. So that like if we talk about species like char kaate wala singara, that has been extinct. Next is UP. We had this visited this Hedapur wetland in Bijnor, and this is also a Ramsar site. It's a man-made barrage on the Ganga floodplains. And UP, if you see, like UP has recorded the sharpest net loss of wetland over the years nationally, and which is 1.03 lakh per hectare, and negative implies the net loss. So there has been increase in the inland man-made wetlands, the reservoirs and the tanks, but that suggests that the natural areas they have been degraded or lost. So the overall species we found is 17 in number in UP specifically, and few of them are hilancha, kulmisak, malancha, water chestnut, bathua, and makhana. So these kalmi saag, hilanchak, and malancha saag, they are commonly foraged and cooked by women, and they also have this medicinal properties like the hilanchak saag, which is valued for controlling the blood sugar. Then there is kalmi saag given to a pregnant woman to improve the milk flow, and there is pani ka kandu that is believed to purify blood. So also at a large scale, there has been a this cultivation of water chestnut, and that covers area approximately 9 kilometers square, and it's a dependable livelihood strategy for the communities there. So the farmers they potentially earn around 1.5 lakh per acre seasonally. But there have been threats that the wetlands are being facing. So the major threat is that these wetlands are being overrun by the invasive species like water hyacinth, and some are lost to the garbage dumping or are converted to the expansion and the farm pollution. Then there is also high grazing pressure from thousands of kettles, mainly from this one Guja community that lives around, and also there is unsustainable farming that is taking place and straining the ecosystem. Um, then if we talk about the communities, the major problem they say is there have been traditional plants available, but younger generation they show a change in the preference, like moving on to the momos and Maggie and preferring more of these modern foods. Moving to Ladakh, so the Sokar Lake, which is a natural inland freshwater lake, and it's also a Ramsar site. So Ladakh, it holds the country's maximum area of a high altitude of wetland, that is 83.8%. And the key edible plants found here was 14. So one of the key species was the wild onions that traditionally used as a substitute for the onions in Ladakhi dishes and sold in the markets. Then there is also this Himalayan nettle, which is a winter staple in one of the most frequently sourced wild plants, which is rich in iron. And people they used to make thukpa during the harsh winters for warmth. And like there is traditional foraging, which elders recall, collecting plants like there is a cinquefoil, which is East Himalayan cinquefoil, often that is eaten as raw during the food scarcity. So here the wetlands they are damaged by the rampant infrastructure development in pipelines. There is a Jal Jeevan mission that is going on, mobile towers and the internet cables, and also the loss of traditional foraging knowledge, which is a common thing in all of the wetlands. And moving on to Odisha, the Chilika Lake, which is the largest brackish water lagoon in Asia, and Odisha has 8.35 lakh hectares of wetlands under area of land under wetlands, and it is the largest lagoon area nationally. So yeah, ecosystem here is actually highly biodiversity. It supports a high biodiversity. There is marine brackish and freshwater species. And the key edible species here is the wild rice, Pankia, which is an indigenous. It is a flood tolerant variety cultivated organically in the floodplains that provide habitat for this native species also. So it is rich in iron and folic acid and has a low glycemic index, making it a nutritious species to flourish. Then there are forage greens communities. They communities just a bit. Communities they forage the leafy greens like kalma and madranga. Then there is also a seaweed cultivation that is going on, and they yield agar and provide income while helping restore the lake's carbon absorption capacity. So, if we talk about the threats, the major threat here is the aquaculture expansion, and nearly 50% of the seasonally inundated wetland areas, they have been lost due to this proliferation of the aquaculture farms. Then there is carp culture. There is intensive carp culture releases pollutants and intensive fish species that sometimes they harm the native species. Also, there is a loss of there is this practice of red rice cultivation that is going on and is dying out as because farmers they lease their rent to the businessmen and they cultivate convert these wetlands into the intensive monoculture. Then the last case study is from Karnataka. So Adavi Somapur pond, which is it's a village pond and a man-made inland freshwater wetland. So it shows a major shift in Indian man-made wetlands because that has uh, expanded substantially over like 72% of the wetland area, and the natural areas they have been declined in this state. So the wetland they provide a rich seasonal food share and nutritional food security. There is national nutritional security in the rural households, offering food rich in iron, calcium, and folate. Then the women, especially here, they forage for plants like Eluri suppu and Honagun suppu, which is valued for the liver health. And there are also the locally consumed wetland flora like water chestnut and water spinach, and the rhizomes from lotus and the water lily. So the threats that uh, the threats in the state are the wetland. They actually suffer from a lot of encroachment, pollution, invasive species. Then there is siltation. There is poorly maintained buffer zones due to urban pressure and the weak governance. So many plants that forage, they are weeds, and that they can adapt to the both dry and wet conditions, indicating environmental stress on the true aquatic species. Then the recommendations integrating wetland plants into the food policy. So the first is the policy and the governance. So in this, so first is the policy and the governance. And first we talk about the recognition of the wetland foods. So the Wetland Conservation and Management Rules of 2017 should clearly mention the importance of these wild edible plants and include them in the conservation and the food policies. Then there should be a protection of the community rights. Like the laws, they must ensure that the local people who traditionally collect and use these wetland plants, they are recognized and supported as the custodians of these ecosystem. Then to include the plant inventories and the sustainable use plans, like the management plans, they should list the edible and the useful plants found in the wetlands and access that how they can be used sustainably. Then comes the knowledge and the awareness. So there should be a proper documentation of these of this traditional wisdom. Like there should be a support to detailed studies that record the local knowledge about these edible plants and their uses and how they can be sustainably harvested and how can they be sustainable harvesting methods. Then training the communities. So there should be help to these biodiversity management communities across India to record these wild edible plants in people biodiversity register. Then should also promote the wild edible uh, plants, like by raising awareness about these nutritional and ecological value of these plants through campaigns or the local markets and the food festivals. Then come the sustainable livelihood and the ecosystem health. So, like create market linkages for them to support women-led self-help groups and the cooperatives to sell and add value to these products like makhana and kevda, ensuring a fair prices. Then encourage these responsible harvesting. Set simple rules for collecting these plants and how and when and where to allow the natural regeneration. And lastly, to restore and maintain the wetlands, just the most important, like reducing pollution, stop encroachment, and revive these natural water flow, and keep these edible plants healthy and safe to eat. So yeah, I'll take a pause here.
Okay. Thank you, Shimali. So as you can see, the report suggests that there are more than 400 edible plants that we could document during our secondary research. However, on the ground, we found that very few people were actually consuming these plants. Actually, many of the reporters that we sent on the ground came back empty-handed, saying that the people they talked to just did not know about the edible plants there. So it was a struggle to figure out these plants on the ground. But we have experts with us here who have worked on these wetlands for a very long time. And maybe they can throw some light on it and they can talk about what can be done to protect wetlands and how to promote the edible plants that are available there. So I will start with Arghya and I will ask a very basic question. So, what is the status of wetlands in the country? We have the stats and everything, but on the ground, is there any way of seeing how, if they are well maintained or if they are productive ecosystems? So, my question is, what is the status and has it changed over time, the productivity and everything? And what are the threats that this habitat and the wild edibles that are present in it, they face? So, Arghya, over to you.
Thanks, Vibha. And thanks, Shimali, for the snippets from the study. They were really good insights. Well, as per our shared understanding, India loses nearly 2% of its wetlands every year. That is quietly reshaping the country's hydrology, ecology, and climate resilience. Um, Wetlands are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, yet they are the most imperiled. According to the National Wetland Atlas, India holds nearly 17 million hectares, like you pointed out in the beginning, accounting for about 5% of India's total geographical area. Um, these are not static water bodies, these are dynamic regulators of the hydrological cycle. Yet, science paints a very sobering picture. Over the last 3 decades, India has lost between 30 and 40% of its natural wetlands. Urban centers have been hit the hardest. The news keep coming up from time to time. Bangalore has lost over 80%, Chennai more than 70%, Delhi nearly 60% since 1960s. And those which are actually still there, in those two-thirds show clear signs of risk of adverse change. The threats are multiple and they are interlocking. Firstly, unplanned urbanization that continues to encroach upon wetland margins, often reclaiming them for construction and infrastructure. Secondly, pollution. Pollution from untreated sewage and industrial effluents, which has turned many freshwater natural inlet wetlands into nutrient-rich, oxygen-starved basins. Thirdly, very importantly, hydrological disruption from embankments, roads, reservoirs that has severed the natural flow connections, starving wetlands of the seasonal inflows. Next, agriculture expansion and drainage for irrigation. And the overarching stretcher, climate change, that is intensifying extremes of flooding and drying, further destabilizing the wetland regimes. Now, despite the wetland rules, less than 15% of India's wetlands are formally mapped or notified, like we know, leaving most outside the purview of legal protection. Weak enforcement and fragmented governance continue to undermine the conservation efforts. The ecological implications are profound here. Wetland loss reduces groundwater recharge, increases flood hazards, releases stored carbon. India's wetlands currently hold an estimated 12 billion tons of carbon. That is invisible, but an extremely vital climate buffer. Every hectare lost today contributes to measurable increases in emissions and a decline in resilience. And therefore, safeguarding these wetlands must therefore move beyond isolated conservation projects. It requires integrating wetlands into river basin, urban planning, improving satellite-based monitoring, tightening pollution controls, encouraging local communities as frontline managers of these ecosystems. Now, science leaves no room for complacency. If the current trends continue, India risks losing not only ecological assets, but the very natural infrastructure which regulates its water and climate systems.
Do you have anything to add about the edible plants?
Yeah, yeah. So, historically, wetlands supported an extraordinary edible plant diversity, from foxnuts to water chestnuts, sacred lotus, water spinach, kalmisak, plants that fed households, stabilized households, and buffered communities against climate change. But you see that biodiversity has changed drastically. Across sites such as Kabartal pointed out, Haidarpur, Chilika, the alpha diversity of edible macrophytes has dropped sharply over the last 2 to 3 decades. As I had discussed in my piece in the report, the functional diversity of edible plants is collapsing in step with the loss of hydroperiod variability. Once the seasonal flood pulse disappears, water chestnut, water lily will vanish with it. At
Mhm.
Wetlands International South Asia, we've observed similar trajectories through our hydroecological assessments in the Ganga Brahmaputra basin, where hydrological regulation and sediment trapping have reduced macrophyte diversity by over 40% in many of the floodplain systems. So, what we are seeing nationally is a part of a broader regional pattern. Now, equally concerning is the social dimension. Younger generations are less familiar with these foods, as the Bihar case study in the report notes that when wetlands dry, communities lose not only food sources, but the cultural vocabulary that sustained them.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So I will now move to Samir to add on to what are the ecosystem services that are being provided by these wetlands, and what is the status of biodiversity in these ecosystems, and specifically what do we know about the edible plants here? Because you're going to talk about ecosystem services, so you would be able to add more to that.
Yeah. So the wetland, actually, the thing is that I want to talk more about the practical way. How do we see a wetland? When we see a wetland, I think most of us haven't seen any functional ecosystem, wetland ecosystem without invasive species. So most of the time when I go across the India, so I see lots of water body. There are certain very good and native species along with lots of invasive species. So that is the main reason why like we are losing lots of flora, lots of aquatic plants. And when we talk about the ecosystem services, edible plants are the one of the most important part of the wetland that comes under provisioning ecosystem services. So in my research, what I have done in Harike wetland in Punjab, so there are lots of around 115 species I have recorded that people are using different use categories. Like in provisional ecosystem services, when you see there were 21 species that were used as a plant food, and there are lots of medicinal plants, including Bacopa monrai, Centella asiatica, Acorus calamus, and there are number of raw material also. People are using like the tall grasses, moonj grass, all along the wetland. That is very important grass. People use that grass for number of purposes, for making fences, ropes, and huts. Besides, there are some uh, such plants which they do oftenly as a fruit. If you see the Phoenix sylvestris, khajur is very common along the wetland. And but people like they forgot to eat like what is that kind of fruit. Even the new generation kids, they don't recognize the date palm tree. And there are lots of places in India which are known for dates, like Chhindwada. Chind is called date palm, and there is one place in MP that is known for that, due to the presence of number of date palms, that area is known as Chhindwada. So there are lots of this is a part of cultural ecosystem services that we talk about the wetland. When we talk about aesthetic beauty, poetry, or photography, when we visit and we enjoy the peace near the wetland. So bird watching, wildlife photography is a part of cultural ecosystem services. And there are lots of other regulatory services and supporting services like biomass accumulation, carbon sink. And we can actually calculate the economic value of wetland, how much that particular wetland is providing water to us for agriculture, for drinking purposes and all that. So in my study I have estimated the value of wetland. So it was around um, uh, 89 billion rupees per year. That is the water, only for the water supply that goes from Harike to Indira Gandhi Canal. It's just for the water supply. And there are lots of number of ecosystem services. So that the water we are getting from the rivers and wetlands. So once we see as a flowing money, then we can address people more clearly that you are not losing wetland, you are losing money. And when you are losing money, you are losing your health also, your food security, your education, your career, everything. So how the wetland can save your life, it must be seen in different angles. Like scientific, looking at the wetland with the scientific view is a different thing. As a social view and their economical view is very important to make them understand. Like if you see nowadays, people cannot recognize the ashwagandha, that is very common medicine plant, but they use the pills of and other things. Even bhringraj, that is very common along the wetland, and even those plants are available near to their house, but they must be using the product. made by certain company. So now see, the missing link is the knowledge of traditional knowledge that passed through the generations for identification of those plants. That is the missing. So that is the also very I think at policy level we can do something that can at school level or college level, it should be very compulsory to identify the plants. That is the very, and you cannot do it without doing it experiential learning. So actually I do with the these expeditions with the kids. So we take schools for farming. So there we show them the process of farming. Besides, how, what are the wild edible plants and what is the role of those wild edible plants when there's no plant in the farm. Where do we, that is also not only the food, this is the habitat for the pollinators. Wild pollinators lives there. So the whole system is connected with our food system. So once we start growing monoculture or monofarming in the form of even the wetland, when we farm only one crop, so we also destroy the ecosystem over there. So it should be like uh, we need to understand the dynamics of wetland ecology. Besides, what are our needs while we are approaching towards the ecological restoration. So that needs to be understand, like how we can recognize any place to build a wetland. There are certain ways to identify the lost wetland, like Typha angustifolia. There's one very important species, what we call it patera, because it looked like
Yeah.
pata. Yeah. So that is the one species we can recognize. Okay, this was the place once upon a time there might be a wetland. So these things.
But just
Yes.
like what you talked about the economic value of water in wetlands, are you aware of any study, similar study on edible plants, the value of edible plants?
Yes, ma'am. I actually did that also, value of edible plant also. So in that, I like found around 5 to 6 lakh rupees per month. What is the amount I have calculated on the basis of amount of plants they take, and what is the economic value of those plants in the market. So with the help of market value, market cost value. So it is on that basis. So it was very less, but there was I have seen the people know the plants, but they hesitate to collect from the wild because of certain reasons. There are many things like, yeah, we used to eat it, but we have lots of things, other things to take. Okay, they know, they're old people, no? Old people, they know, okay, this is the karmika sag, we used to eat it. We used to eat, okay, that khatta mithi, oxalis corniculata, we used to make chutney out of it. And the thing is that uh, the disconnection is happening from generation. So that is the main cause.
Actually, that is what we also found in our study. As I said, many of the reporters came back empty-handed. Just they could not find the right person to ask.
Yeah.
And even, like when I was reporting from Karnataka, so first I took two young boys to with me to the wetland. They could not identify anything. Then I took three women, and they found 20 plants
Yeah.
the same place. So it's the knowledge that is being lost. So that is a bit of a problem. I will now ask Nivedita ji to talk about her work on the revival of wetlands in Uttar Pradesh, and if you could tell us something about the biodiversity in them. And what I also want to understand is when people are thinking about reviving wetlands, and even when you are talking with them about reviving wetlands, is edible plant part of the reason for revival? So Nivedita ji, over to
Sure.
you. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Vibaji. And first of all, congratulations to you and your team at CSE for putting together this very important report. I think you were just asking whether anybody has come across such a report on edible plants coming out of wetlands and all. For me, it was a rare experience, honestly, because, and I'm sure that this must have been a very challenging job because increasingly, as all my fellow speakers are also sharing their experiences, this is increasingly becoming extinct, actually. And there are several reasons to it. So my name is Nivedita, and I come from Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group, which is an organization based out of Gorakhpur, but we work across several states in India on various issues of environment, climate change, disaster risk reduction, climate resilient agriculture, and so on. I'm also happy to inform that we are celebrating our 50th year on the 15th of November. So we are having our golden jubilee here, and in which Sunita Narayanji is coming. So we are very, very privileged to have her for this event. Coming back to the topic that we are discussing today. So GAG has been working on wetlands since quite many years, and wetland ecosystems have been part of our working portfolio since many years. So there are various levels of work that we do. One is on the ground implementation, wherein we rejuvenate and restore wetlands and the life cycle and the wetland ecology, basically, so that all the provisioning, cultural, supporting and regulating services, the ecosystem services of the wetlands are restored. That's one work that we do. And here we have worked in several districts. One of them is the Gautam Buddha Nagar, very close to Delhi, the Noida and the Greater Noida areas, which are increasingly facing a lot of challenges when it comes to groundwater depletion. So the Niti Aayog report few years back that came out, it said that in Gautam Buddha Nagar, the groundwater table is falling down by 1 meter annually. So that was a very starking data for us. And so we have worked in around 10 to 12 wetlands. We have revived these wetlands and to restore their ecosystem services and the biology and the ecology of the whole ecosystem. We've done this in other districts as well, for instance, in Gorakhpur, in Shravasti, and other so many districts in UP, basically. The second part of our work is also on how we can engage citizens, especially when it comes to whether it is Ramsar wetlands or non-Ramsar wetlands. As the Ramsar Convention also outlines that for engaging citizens for the wise use of wetlands, there is something called as SEPA strategies that need to be developed. So we were working in UP on 3 or 4 Ramsar wetlands, wherein we evolved this SEPA strategies, which stands for communication, education, participation, and awareness strategies, how to engage the citizens, how to engage the communities living in close proximity to the wetlands, so that they can be also party in conserving these wetlands. Not only they over extract wetlands for their own use, but also support the sort of conservation of these wetlands. Our work also spans across developing, for instance, in UP, we've done this with the Directorate of Environment, wherein we developed a wetland assessment framework, especially for Amrit Sarovar, all the Amrit Sarovars that are being implemented and that are being sort of constructed on the ground with the help of NAREGA and other government agencies. So how do we assess the ecosystem services of these wetlands? So our portfolio on wetland actually spans across on-ground implementation till the policy level integration and assessments that we do on the ground. Coming back to this whole discussion about the edible plants and how, as Vibha ji was asking, whether this has been a discourse or not. So whenever we have engaged with the communities and whenever we have done some research on the ground when it comes to wetlands, what we get to hear from the older generation is that earlier the communities relied upon the wetlands a lot for their food system, basically. A lot of it came from there. For instance, the boro rice, the boro paddy, or the kamal gatte ki baat hoti hai, ya berra hai, ya singhada, makhana, even the prawns and the fishes, and so much of food was coming out, and that under the provisioning services or as ecosystem service, कम्युनिटीज रियली डिपेंडेड ऑन इट. करमुआ का साग हो गया और ये सारी जो चीजें हैं ये पहले होती थी, एंड नाउ ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम this has degraded a lot. In fact, the newer generation, as Samir ji was just rightly mentioning, they don't know about it actually, and somehow it has remained as a very informal food structure, I would say, or a food system in the society. It has not got the formal recognition, it is not out there in the market so that people can access to it or eat it or something. Some of these foods like tinni ka chawal and all has still remained, which is used mainly consumed in during fasting periods like in Navratri or any other religious festival. When people fast, they look for it, and the shopkeepers also bring and sell it at a higher price, and people consume it for 1 or 2 days, and then it's gone. But it is not part of the regular diet, in our place basically. So this shift has definitely happened over so many years. And what we've also seen that why this has happened, if we talk about it a little bit, there are several reasons to it. One is, what we see is that due to the increasing population also, even in the rural areas, uh, wetlands are getting encroached. Their whole water holding capacity is also getting reduced because of it, because a lot of encroachment is happening. Wetlands or ponds, or जो हर घर में एक तालाब हुआ करता था पहले, they are all becoming like solid waste dumping sites, to be very honest. So what is happening is the wetland ka jo apna life system comes from these plants, life system comes from these small the fauna that grows inside these wetlands. They are dying basically, and that is why we are not getting access to this kind of edible plants and food which used to happen in these wetlands. uh, and I know I'm speaking long, but that one point that I want to really bring out here is that earlier the communities were very, very connected to the wetlands. So they drew benefits out of it in terms of edible food, in terms of other services, ecosystem services. But now, increasingly, there is becoming a disconnect. The disconnect is also of two types in our experience. One, when the wetlands became Ramsar wetlands, in the Ramsar wetlands, one is not allowed to do any activity because it becomes a very protected area. So communities are completely cut off from those wetlands. And once they are cut off, they don't really bother about it, honestly. So they say, हमें क्या मिल रहा है, हमें क्या करना है. So that kind of an approach comes into the picture. The second disconnect is because most of these wetlands are now under the control of government bodies, whether it is the forest department, whether it is NREGA, whether it is any other government agencies which is working on it. And there again, the community is getting disconnected. So this whole disconnect of communities from wetland, which was traditionally never the case, is also one of the reasons that the extent of this whole wetland based food system or edible plants is also happening. So basically the community ownership nahi reh gayi hai, so then the wetlands are also getting degraded at the same time. Edible plants उसमें फिर नहीं हो रहे हैं, या उसके बारे में जानकारी किसी को नहीं हो रही है. So these are some of the points that I wanted to bring out at this stage. I will take a pause here and allow Vibhaji to speak, and I'll be happy to provide more inputs if needed. Thank you.
So what we have found out from the speakers is one that there's seriously no awareness about the edible plants in these wetlands, and secondly, the quality of the wetland is degrading, and also access is getting affected. So these are three major things. So now I would go for the second round of questions, which is for which I'm going to ask just one common question to everyone, and I will again start with Arghya about this. So my question now is, why are these plants neglected and forgotten by people and policy? Many of these things have been answered. I'm sorry to ask this again. But the actual question here is, what can be done to bring edible plants in wetlands in the policy and back on our plates? So here I want comments on what can be changed in the policy, because the government policy talks about wise use. But what is this wise use? They are not describing. So, how do we ensure that when the policy is actually talking about wise use, the wise use should include something about the edible nature of the plant? So, Arghya, would you like to comment on this and how we can bring it back to the policy and back on our plates?
Yeah. So, you see, as far as wetlands are concerned, India's policy framework is constantly evolving. But edible biodiversity still sits in the blind spot. Nobody talks about it. The wetland rules, for instance, decentralize wetland governance, but they continue to view wetlands primarily as powerhouses for fisheries or for irrigation. Even the Ramsar site information sheets omit edible flora altogether. This point has been highlighted in the report. To address this, I believe we need a three-tiered approach. Firstly, there has to be recognition and data integration. we must establish a national inventory of edible wetland flora embedded within the Wetlands of India portal and linked with the respective state wetland authorities and as well as the state biodiversity boards. Now, this database should go well beyond taxonomy. They should try to capture productivity, phenology, nutritional composition, traditional uses. Secondly, I believe, with the increasing number of integrated wetland management plans, inclusion in management planning is a must. Integrated management plans for Ramsar as well as for non-Ramsar sites should explicitly quantify plant-based provisioning services, from the seed yield of water chestnuts to the rhizome productivity of lotus. These matrices deserve the same policy visibility as, say, fish yield or carbon stock. Thirdly, there has to be an integration with the national missions. Edible wetland species align perfectly with Amrit Dharohar or Mission Sahbhagita, as well as the National Food Security Mission. Embedding them within a nutrition biodiversity framework can help translate traditional ecological knowledge into measurable livelihood and dietary outcomes. I'd like to end by saying recognizing edible microphytes as both biodiversity assets as well as nutritional resources can make conservation socially rewarding again.
Thank you, Arghya. And you are working in an organization which is following wetlands. Is this kind of a thought process visible in any policy making or any government plan or policy as of now?
I'd like to highlight an example. One of the unique projects that we are executing right now, that I am a peer of, is looking into the Tata Motors manufacturing facilities in Sanand, Gujarat, Jamshedpur, Jharkhand, Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh, and Pimpri Chinchwad, Pune in Maharashtra. And we are looking at a 100-kilometer radius and all wetlands that lie within that 100-kilometer radius outside the existing regulatory frameworks, which means no wetlands which are within the coastal regulatory zone or within protected areas or already designated Ramsar sites or notified wetlands. Within the remaining wetlands, we are trying to understand how can they be brought into the policy framework. I understand not all can be designated a PA, or for that matter, whether some of them can be designated an OECM with the OECM guidelines now coming up, or is there a different way to bring it under the policy ambit? So we are exploring that idea at the moment, and that is in discussion with these 4 state wetland authorities, as well as the Ministry of Wetlands Division of the Ministry, and trying to figure out how can the remaining wetlands and the traditional knowledge that surrounds it be brought to the national forte
And
and
edible
policy
plants
changes.
is part of the
Yes,
traditional.
very much a part of it. Yeah.
That's good to hear. So, Samir, would you like to add, put on your views in here on this question?
Yes, ma'am. So what I think, there are lots of things, policies with respect to conservation of environment and all that. But the main thing is how we can implement those things. Like there is a biodiversity register program. Okay, every village has to make a biodiversity register with all these edible plants, wetland, all the biodiversity. But right now it is not functional. I have visited lots of areas, so it's just on paper. So the recording things is different thing. And what I think, uh, first of all, we can make such things, like how, if you see the tradition, how we are changing our food system.
Mm-hmm.
And see, advertisement of, for example, advertisement of avocado. Like avocado is very rich in nutrition and all that, but we forget the guava is much nutrition, amla, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So how those channels are coming, like what people are looking at, social media and other things, where they go, they get any fancy thing to eat. So we can have such culture development, or some sort of village level or district level. There should be some organization who can take, what do you call, lead to make, like these are the water spinach or water chestnut is there. This have lots of nutrition value, because most of the now the coming generation, they are much educated. They select their food according to their diet and all that. Or there is something you put attached some status or something. So they it is a more driven to that. Like why we do earlier we had some certain set of food, and we can collect like makoi, if you see the Solanum nigrum. So we used to walk and take, okay, this is very good and it healthy and very tasty and medicinal value, all the things. But right now nobody will do that because of there are certain lack of information. And again, we knew we must have some uh, efforts towards identification of plants, or with the, like we can align these courses with the students curriculum. Like they have botany, they have all the things, we can add these things. Now the NCERT has also reduced the number of families. Earlier they used to study two families, Solanaceae and Fabaceae. Now they reduced to one family. And there's no such things I have seen for identification of plants. At least there should be 50 species, edible plants or wild species, that every school student must know. So that kind of things we can implement at the school levels, or organizations can do that. So I think it will support more for identification and recognition of those plants. Then people will start using, and then we can convince the people and other. Now if you see, there people are ready to hesitate or to conserve a forest if the tree is cutting any here. But if the wetland is vanishing, nobody will speak, because we don't have any vision towards a wetland, how a wetland can help us. So there are certain things we have to think, and most of the important thing, in my opinion, is the identification. What is very important. Then how we can figure out after.
But
Yeah.
the point that you made about the popularization of a plant or a edible food, that happened in Makhana, but that is actually not protecting the wetland in Bihar. Makhana is now being cultivated on farmland instead of that. So this kind of a problem has to be ensured that this does not happen with other plants also. So I think policy needs to take care of that. So I will ask Nivedita ji to now put in her view on this question of how we can actually get it back into the policy and on our plate.
Sure, Vibhaji. I think I agree with my previous speakers also. The first thing we need to raise awareness about these wetland-based edible plants. जानकारी कम है लोगों में, and especially with this new generation coming up, as he was rightly saying that just because avocado dips and avocado sandwiches have been made so popular and being sold at a higher price, people think that they're very nutritious. It may be nutritious. I'm not denying that, but there are so much other nutritious food that we get from these wetlands which are not getting popularized, which are people are not aware of it, and and there is also a problem of accessibility because it's not available in the market as well. So I think that kind of awareness, and a very focused marketing strategies need to be thought of when we talk about these plants. The second thing is, when it comes to wetlands and its revival, rejuvenation, and the livelihood patterns around or inside the wetlands, there need to be a convergence between the agriculture department, between the forest department, and other departments related to the wetlands and its rejuvenation, so that those kind of species, those kind of plants can also be promoted by the agriculture department. As of now, I have limited information, but I don't think that this is happening in a very organized manner. It comes to only wheat and paddy and other conventional crops, but this kind of edible wetland based plants are not being promoted by the relevant agriculture departments. The third thing is also that the communities should be encouraged to take up these kind of cultivation of these kind of plants in the wetlands, but at the same time they should not end up in over extraction of resources or using more and more chemical fertilizers or chemical inputs that can disturb the ecosystems of the wetland. So maybe payment for ecosystem services could be a strategy wherein if communities are sort of using providing the environmental benefits at the same time cultivating these kind of crops, then they can some incentives of that sort can be thought of, so that we ensure that the wise use of wetlands is maintained. Ultimately, whatever we do, we have to see that the wetlands ka wise use hota rahe and it should not be over extracted. The last point definitely is India has very well defined policies, as my previous speakers were also mentioning, be it the Amrit Dharovar, Amrit Sarovar, and NPCA, and so many Mission Sahbagita, and so many other guidelines. But I think, and in our experience, what we have seen is that at the district level and below district level, there is lack of capacities in the district level departments, in the government departments, and other communities that need to be strengthened. There is a district wetland committee. It is definitely on the paper. At most places, it is there also, but they do lack the holistic capacities on how to develop these wetlands, especially taking into account this edible plant thing as well. And also the wetland mitras, which are which have to be sort of developed at the community level, they also need to be taken into account, and they also need to be involved in spreading awareness and promoting these kind of edible plants. So these are some of the points that immediately come to my mind, that where we can ensure that these edible plants are back on our plates, at the same time also conserving our wetland ecosystems.
These are very interesting points. And the best thing about wetlands plants, which are popular, is that they are very high value plants. They can provide a lot of livelihood to the people who live around them. And maybe, as Sameer was talking about, अगर लोगों को पता चलेगा कि पैसा जा रहा है, तो maybe they would be more interested in protecting them.
Absolutely.
Edible plants, only that I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about the reeds and the other things that provide true livelihood. But for example, kevda can provide livelihood to people. Similarly, kamal kakdi is providing a lot of livelihood. But the problem that I see is that these are 10 or 15 very popular wetland plants which are available in the market also. But as we found out, there were hundreds of plants which nobody knows about, and those need to come back into the on our plate. So we need to figure out something about that. So let me check the questions. Shimali, are you checking the questions? If you see any question that we can add, uh, we can talk about. Okay. So we have a question about Ramdana, that is amaranth is actually a land plant. This is Dr. Vidyanand Jha who is saying that. The Kubai business in Bihar is only next to Makhana in Singhara. ठीक है. The thing is, what we found out in our study is that these wetland plants are very, very adaptable. So they can actually grow on land also, and they can grow on in water situation also, watery condition and wet conditions also. One of them was, for example, things like tamarind. We were very surprised to find tamarind in wet ecosystem, but it grows very well there. So these are adaptable plants. So if one of the reporters who went out on the field found amaranth, that could be the reason for it, because these plants are adaptable. So we also have we don't have any question, but Tyasa Adhya has talked about that Ramsar designation does not necessarily alienate local communities. The fact that Chilka is India's first Ramsar site, and communities use it, there is no bar. What alienates people is the mismanagement leading to degradation of water quality, and that is when the community loses their connection to what connects them to the wetland. So that's a very interesting point. Uh, that's how management of that particular area could be actually managed. I suppose that's a lesson for other Ramsar sites and other notified wetlands also. There's a question, can we bring a wetland plant to our house garden? If we know, we could plant. This is Anbum Arahum. So, does anyone have a point of view on this? Can we bring them home? Can we grow them at home? Samir want to say something? Please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So it depends on how big wetland you want. You can create a mini wetland also. I have created in a pond, and all the three type layers of vegetation I have planted. So it depends where you are making that wetland and what are the species you have chosen. So choose accordingly. Like if you are making a mini wetland or small kind of thing, so you can use hydrilla and vallisneria as a submerged plant, and which are under the water all the time. Then you can use also trapa. Just plant one trapa. It's so beautiful, and the leaves are very interesting. So that can be your floating plant in that term, and you can also use azolla and lamina. They are microphytes, small.
They're
And
talking
then
about edible plants. I think they
so
would.
edible plants, yeah. So trapa is one edible plant is there,
Mhm.
and that nitrogen, like azolla, helps in fixing nitrogen.
Mhm.
So for the production of wetland edible plants, those plants are also important because they regulate the nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, and that's why we need those biodiversity of wetland with the edible plants also. And there are one karmi like Ipoma aquatica you can plant. I think climber is there.
That's
So
interesting.
that is nice. And clocacia is there, arvi, the wild arvi. The leaves are very tasty. So you and Basila alba is there. So and there are lots of climber species we can use, and lots of herbs also.
So,
So it
for
is
the
possible to make it.
हाँ, so for the common people, अरबी उगा सकते हैं, आप
Arbi,
हरा उगा सकते हैं,
हाँ,
आप
or Basila alba is that palak, with a big leaf. Hmm.
I don't know, but थोड़ा सा जैसे कई काफी ऐसे वेटलैंड के पौधे हैं जो आराम
हाँ
से उगाए जा
हाँ, उगा
सकते हैं।
सकते हैं आप, कर्मी का साग उगा सकते हैं, खस ग्रास आप भी उगा सकते हैं,
हाँ,
खस वेटिवेरिया जो है वो लगा सकते हैं बहुत इजीली।
ठीक
तो
है।
इस तरह के प्लांट्स हैं, हम एक तरह मतलब काफी कुछ लगाया जा सकता है वेटलैंड में।
So इसमें we have another comment by Jay Kumar KV who's saying that people surrounding Loktak Lake in Manipur have strong bond and ownership over the wetland, and if the wetland conservation involves the community, it will be very successful. So that's a very good point. That whatever we do when we are talking about wise use or we are talking about protection of wetlands in the country, community involvement is important, and Nivedita ji has been carrying out this involvement. It has been involving community in the protection, so that's a very interesting point. So I think that is what we have. That is what we have for in the comment sections. We would be sharing a video recording. It would be available on our website. Sukanya has already shared uh, the link. So it was very nice having you all with us on the panel, and we will end here. And we hope that your suggestions would be heard by the policymaker, and you people are part of the policy also. So please do try to ensure that when you are doing studies or carrying out, you are in some meeting around wetlands, edible plants are also part of the discussion. Please do bring them in, and I would request all the viewers of this webinar to also ask for this change. So that's the only way that these very nutritious and healthy wetland plants would be available in the market or on your plate. So please do talk about these, and please do try to include them in your diet. Please go through the report. It has a list of all the wetland plants that you can consume, and let's try to bring this subject in the mainstream. Wetland plants, as when we started our research, we found no studies on this per se, like nobody was talking about it, nobody was talking about the policy. So it's a good thing. Before I end, I would ask all my panelists if they want to end with give a final statement or something. That would be nice. If not, then we would be going. Okay, so we will end the webinar now. Thank you for joining.